everyone. Now you're watching the live stream of CGTN. I'm today's host. I'm the reporter of CGTN. My name is Guo Tianqi, and today we're going to talk about the latest issue on the international society, which is the Indian-Pakistan conflict. And this conflict, I will give you a short introduction, and then we'll invite some top scholars in China to share their opinions with us. The conflict began after a shooting in India administrated at Kashmir on April the 22nd, killing 26 people, and India blamed a Pakistan-backed militant, and though Pakistan denied it. And India then took actions. On May the 1st, India declared a suspension of the 1960 Indus Water Treaty, threatening to cut off 80% of Pakistan's irrigation water, which severely impacted Pakistan's agricultural sector. And on May 7th, the India launched the Operation Sindoor, attacking multiple targets in the Pakistan and the Pakistan-administrated Kashmir. The Pakistan Air Force says that they shut down 5 Indian fighter jets, and including 3 Rafales, 1 MiG-29, and 1 Sukhoi, and a combat drone whose debris fell inside Indian territory. And Pakistan says none of the Pakistani aircraft went inside Indian airspace. And the international community's response, including China, the UN, the US, and Japan, all called for the restraint and peaceful resolution. And the conflict persists, and leaving this regional security uncertain. And in this session, we're very honored to have Mr. Wang Jin, the director for the Center of International Strategic Studies of the Northwest University of China, to join us. And we know that you are, hello, Mr. Wang Jin.
Hi, everybody. It's my honor.
Yeah. And we know that you are very familiar with the international counterterrorism work. And we know that the starting point of this conflict was an action labeled as a terrorist attack by India. So does the term fighting terrorism be able to justify India's action? And has it violated some international law?
I think we have to very clearly say that actually, when we talk about this kind of incident that later led to the further escalation of tension, particularly the recent crisis and war between India and Pakistan, we have to very, very define that actually the terms between the differences between the terms of so-called terrorism and the responsibility. Because when we're talking about the very first incident, yes, of course, some militias, they carried a weapon and penetrated into the Indian-controlled Kashmir area and killing the civilians. Of course, is to some extent, we should say that they are in accordance with the very features of the terrorist attack. That is for sure. So that is okay. There's no problem that India defined it as a terrorist attack. And I think majority of the international community will agree with it. But the problem is that then India defined that, okay, now Pakistan government, Pakistan security establishment, Pakistan national intelligence establishments has a very direct responsibility over these attacks. And under the judgment of India themselves, they believe that, okay, they have the rights to launch counterattacks to the targets inside Pakistan's territory as well as Pakistan-controlled Kashmir area to revenge the so-called terrorist attack that defined by India themselves, without the consideration of, for example, organizing the kind of international committee, particularly send out an invitation for Pakistan to share the conclusion, to share the kind of information, but just based upon India's own conclusion. So that is why we have to say we're talking about different things. On the one hand, as we say, that some militias, they carried a weapon and killing the civilians inside Indian controlled Kashmir area randomly. Of course, that is some kind of features of the terrorist attack. But then you cannot say that I have this excuses so that I can attack everybody based upon just my own judgment. These are two different things. So that is why I think when we are talking about the origin of the war, we have to say, okay, then Indians feeling is important. Indians' losses, everybody feel sorry. But then, on the other hand, we have to find out who should be responsible for that. That is very, very important conclusion and should be based upon a very cautious and a very careful investigation. And this investigation also should based upon the agreement, should based upon the idea and the opinions of the international community, not just based upon the unilateral decision of India themselves.
Okay, so if India continue to push forward the attack or this military action, uh, does India have some potential to violate some international law?
Of course, when we're talking about one thing, is that Indian believe that this something, for example, a so-called terrorist attack, is was the result of the Pakistan's violation of the international law. Because from the perspective and understanding of India, they believe Pakistan supported so-called terrorist network inside Pakistan, and Pakistan is its security and national establishments were organizing, and still are organizing and supporting the so-called terrorist organizations inside their own territory and penetrated into the territories and the controlled Kashmir areas of Indian side. So that is why Indian believe that they are violating and Pakistanis are violating the international law. But then these cannot become the excuses of the Indians themselves to violate the international law on the other areas. So when we're talking about military actions, Indians say, okay, that they have the rights to launch counterattack, but then you have no rights to say, I also violated the international law from the other area, particularly the water resources, because this Indo water is a very international river, and they cannot say that it is all their own resources, their own national kind of water resources that could be monopolized by themselves. So that is two different things. So that is why I think against this backdrop, India's unilateral decision and without the consideration of Pakistanis feeling, Pakistanis interests, to some extent escalate the tension between the two countries and worsen the atmosphere for the possibilities of peace and stability between the two sides. So that is why I think the very dangerous scenario right now actually harms both Indians and Pakistanis.
Yes, indeed. But judging from the current situation right now, more than 100 aircrafts have already participated in the war, and has the counterterrorism issue have already been transformed into a military conflict between countries?
Yes. We unfortunately it is, because when we're talking about counterterrorism and counter extremism and something like that, we are always talking about two things. On the one hand, terrorism and particularly the modern terrorism, the modern extremism, actually they are international. We are not talking about, we're not just talking about, for example, the Al Qaeda. We're not talking about Daesh, I mean the ISIS. We're also talking about many regional terrorist networks. And these regional extremism and terrorism networks, majority of them are international organizations. So they may, for example, find harbored some kind of bases inside one country or two countries, and then launched this kind of the terrorist attacks inside the other countries' territories. So that is why when we are, secondly, when we want to say kind of the launch of kind of the terrorism attacks, counterterrorism movement, we should, based upon the international cooperation and the multilateral cooperation, that is the first priority that I think some countries should consider, and that is the foundation that some country want to prevent the further emergence of the terrorist attacks inside their own territory. But then what happened right now is that India, just based upon their own, well, first of all, based upon their own unilateral conclusion, without sharing the information and investigation proofs with the Pakistani government. And on the other hand, India just believe that the military way be the only reliable and workable way to so-called eliminate the terrorist organizations inside Pakistan. But that is impossible, because when you're talking about terrorism, extremism, they are not just organizations. They are kind of the ideology. They are kind of thinking. You cannot use a weapon to killing the thinkings. They are actually different things. So that is why I think the war right now is a direct result of the distrust and division between the two countries, Pakistan on one side, India on the other side. And they have other kind of the divisions, division over the borders, division over the frontier, divisions over the status of the Kashmir area, who controls where and how to control. So then some kind of the very important and very sensitive issue, such as this kind of terrorist attack, I mean, the late last month erupted, it would be easily be turned into the escalation of tension and then fallout war between the two countries. So that is why we say, unfortunately, we don't want this kind of terrorist attack be turned into the war. But unfortunately, right now it is kind of the war that is still ongoing between the two countries right now.
Yes, indeed, a red flag for the international society. And you just mentioned about the Hindu River, and we know that on May the 1st, India already declared to threaten to cut off 80% of Pakistan's irrigation water. And we know that the so-called water weapon have been introduced to the society. And again, but does India have the right to make such a decision?
It's a very controversial issue because from some countries maintain that the river, for example, the water inside their own territories, when we're talking about the modern nation-state structure, and the nation-state structure, their government has the authority to manage the natural resources, including the water inside their own territories. But then the river, when the river become international, I mean, the river just across different borders, across different countries, is how to distribute the water resources become the international issue because it's not just say is closely related to about the territorial the rights or the national sovereignty rights, but also it has related to the rights of other people's civilians, other people's their own developments. So Indo River, as you mentioned, it, the international river is across to China, India, and Pakistan, and of course every country neighboring or along this river has the rights to get the resources to develop themselves to benefit from these resources because the river has already has already existed for, I mean, maybe millions of years or maybe longer. But then the countries, modern states, just be there for just hundreds of years. So that is why I think the Indo River benefited the people along the river for quite a long time. It cannot be monopolized by India themselves, but actually it should be the benefits other people. And we have to mention that India has the rights, maybe from their own thinking, they have the rights to monopolize every drop of water inside the Indian River that cross their own countries. But that would lead to other difficulties for Indians themselves in the longer term, because within the short term they try to get every drop of water into their own territories. But then first of all, I mean, on the one hand, how to maintain such a sum of water is unimaginable because the water flows every day. I mean, the water will be accumulated every day. So you cannot say that you just build a dam and then control every drop of water. And this, I mean, according to the perspective of infrastructure, no modern project can make that deal, can make that goal. So I mean, someday that India also have to reconsider whether it is safe to keep all the water inside their own territories without leaving them to the latter part of India of the Pakistan territories and the people there. And on the other hand, when all the water or the majority of the water being cut, how the kind of for example, environmental problems will be erupted inside Pakistani's territories and other parts of the India. Because when we're talking about water, it's just we're not just talking about water. We're also talking about, for example, the kind of the ecosystem or the kind of the kind of the social system and the kind of the environmental system. So when you cut the water, I mean, one part of the water, it will lead to the other part of the environmental problem, the other part of the social problem. And then in turn, this problem will harm Indians themselves. So that is why I think India may, in the short term, use it as a tool to give more pressure to Pakistan, and political tool and military tool. But then finally, someday, I think India will also be negatively affected by its own decisions right now.
Yes, indeed. And the water treaty, it said itself, is to protect all the countries that benefit from the Indo River. And it says that India cannot change or suspend it. And also, Pakistan have already, they also have some um, mm, so-called weapons, the treaty weapons. They can also say the suspension, other kind of peaceful treaty with India. And besides that, the Pakistani railways minister Abbasi also issued a strong warning in response to this threat, and he said that our nuclear weapon are not for show. If you cut off our water, I'll cut off your life. And this went viral on the internet. And with such confrontations between the nuclear armed two countries, and should the world be worried?
Of course, I think everybody will be worried. I mean, first of all, Chinese will be worried because these two countries are neighboring countries for China. And these two countries, both Pakistan and India, has a large amount of nuclear weapons. And when somebody really came that when the two sides decided to direct the nuclear weapons towards each other, then it will harm not only themselves but also harm Chinese people. So that is why China will feel being very seriously threatened. And then I think the international community will feel unsafe because if the nuclear war erupted, it would be the first nuclear war, I mean, ever since when humankind started to show in this world. Because of course, Japan at the end of the Second World War, they suffered two nuclear bombs, but that is only, I mean, one-way attack from the United States towards Japan and try to end the war as early as possible. But then when we're talking about two nuclear countries, they attacked each other with nuclear bomb. It's another disaster, I mean, bigger disaster that could lead to the uncertainties. That's then finally more casualties and more disasters for all the humankind. So that's why I think the international community will feel worried, and everybody will feel unsafe, and everybody will be seriously threatened by these days. So that is why this scenario should be very carefully prevented, and everybody should get involved very timely and urgently to try to bridge the communication channel between the two countries, because Pakistan and India, unfortunately, right now they have no communication channel, and their only way to sending messages towards each other is trying to beat each other. I mean, through their more and more assertive stances to show their own aggressive gestures. So that is why communication channels should be constructed very urgently and timely, and international mediation should be organized as early as possible.
Yes. So, and let's go back to the origin of the conflict. We know that you are a top scholar in China in terms of the extremism. And looking at the current situation, do you think there are signs of further development of the religious extremism in the Kashmir region? And what are the countermeasures?
I think you mentioned a very critical issue or the factor that when we're talking about war, we are not talking about the division between India and Pakistan. We are also talking about the status of Kashmir, and also we are talking about the so-called hostilities between the two religions to some extent. I mean, Islam and Hindu, because actually they are these two ideologies or these two religions has some kind of a historical computation in this area. Because on the one hand, as you mentioned, that when we're talking about status of Kashmir, they could relate it back to about nearly 8 or 9 decades ago when the British tried to withdraw from the South Asia, and then they try to decide what kind of a status of every so-called provinces of every locals of the so-called British-controlled Indian area. So then the Kashmir, as we know that there at that time the majority of the Kashmir area they were Muslims, but then the leaders of the area was Hindu. So that is why the Hindu leader decided to join India, while the majority of the local people they decided to join Pakistan. So that's then led to the very first Indian-Pakistan war, and then created the very division of the Kashmir area that lasted even today. So this is a very historical kind of the hatred, a historical kind of the different description over the status of this Kashmir area and how or what kind of the future that should be based for the local people there. And then on the other hand, when we are talking about religions, it's also we can go back to the British withdrawal because they try to separate the different parts of the British-controlled Indian areas and created two countries: Islam country on the one hand and the Hindu country on the other hand, and that's further led to waves of disasters and the tragedies for the local people. So that is why I think the hatred then maintained and also escalated and grow, and the distrust maintained, the competition also grow. So that is why I think when we're talking about extremism, they have their social and ideological and historical deeply roots, and we cannot solve all this kind of the problem with in only one war. Or we cannot end all this kind of the problem just through military and coercive ways. So on the one hand, military ways, but then on the other hand, political, international, and regional cooperation and cross-cultural dialogues and social, for example, social multilateralism and social tolerance should also be upheld rather than the kind of the coercive way. So that is why I think India and Pakistan, they both need to reflect what is happening now. We both maybe try to find ways to cooperate with each other, hold new dialogues with each other. But the priority right now for them is to maintain calm, maintain restraint, and maintain rational.
Mhm. So what the international society can do, does this problem only can be solved inwardly, or the international society like the UN or UK, for example, who solve their historical problems, can the international society do something about this?
We expected that they should do something because it's actually a very dangerous scenario we're facing. I think the United Nations is a very platform for the international voices to international shared views and the consensus. So the United Nations should do something very urgently and timely to try to get involved into the ongoing war and try to separate two sides and then to organize kind of the meetings and help and construct the bridges. So on the other hand, I think UK could do something, of course, because because UK has a very strong connections with Indian, and also UK has some other channels to directly or indirectly influence the decision-making circles of Pakistan. So through, for example, Arab states, through maybe the UAE, the Saudi Arabia, and other countries. So I think that the international community should do a lot. And particularly, I think United States should do more because United States has a very strong influence in this region, and United States has some kind of the determining role in the majority of the existing international hot support issues. So that's why we are still what we are still looking at is that United States say something, but then it's just maintain the reports rather than some kind of the practical measures. So that is why I think international society, international community, particularly the powers, they could do something and they should do something. They need to do something urgently right now.
Yes, indeed. But given right now the tough situation, do you think there are still possibilities in the future for the two countries to dialogue and make some peaceful move?
I think on the one hand, we are seeing the escalation, growing tension between the two countries. They try to target each other, they try to attack each other, and fly jets, fighters are on kind of the combating status in the sky. Of course, we were looking at the more and more dangerous scenario. But then on the other hand, what we are looking at is there kind of the certain kind of the rationality, there's certain kind of restraint the attitudes towards each other. Because, for example, India, to some extent, does not launch very large waves of attacks against the civilians and the political targets inside Pakistan. And also Pakistan's counterattacks against the Indians' attacks also concentrated upon the military targets rather than the social and the infrastructure targets. So that is why both sides, they keep some kind of restrained attitude and rational attitudes without the attention to escalate to the fall out of war. So that is why there were still possibilities, there were still chances to try to pacify the tension. So the first priority is construct how to bring the two sides together and how to help build this kind of the communication channel between the two countries. So that is why we say the international community should do something as early as possible.
Yes, and the China's government also said that to called for the two parties to restrain and solve the disputes through peaceful negotiations. So what do you think in the future the Chinese government can do? Can China provide a platform for them to negotiate in the future?
I think on the one hand, China has already done a lot because we know that China during the past 1 week, on the one hand, China expressed our very strong attitudes to the opposition of the escalation of tension for both sides, Pakistan, Indian, and also on the other hand, China diplomats and Chinese the delegation visited and met the Pakistan representatives to express China's concerns over the escalation of tensions. Of course, on the other hand, then some Indian will say, okay, then you are the partner of Pakistan, you have the kind of the role to say something. So that is reflect China why China cannot play the bigger role, because actually from the perspective of Indians, they still have some kind of distrusting attitudes towards Chinese role. Many Indians or some kind of Indian social and political ideas still maintain that China are supporting Pakistan, although it's of course against the fact. So that is why China has already done a lot. And then in the future, China will continue to watch the development of the ongoing tension between India and Pakistan, and China will do our best together with the international community to try to facilitate the peace as early as possible. So the key is that India and Pakistan themselves should continue to maintain restraint, to retain rationality, and we have to know that the war should not be understood as a tool to end terrorism and to end extremism. Tolerance and multilateralism should be the priority and the key to end the hatred and division, particularly between India and Pakistan.
Yes, we still have 2 to 3 minutes. Do you have some other insights to share with our audience?
I think that we are witnessing the kind of the crucial choices right now for the international and the community, because India and Pakistan, they are so powerful, both of them so powerful, both of them have the large amount of population, such a bigger land, and such strong weaponry systems, and both sides could launch maybe bigger military wave of military actions against each other tomorrow. But we also have to stress here again that then on the one hand, the unilateralism should not be understood as a way, a reliable or the workable way to end terrorism. This should not be insisted. And on the other hand, the wars will finally harm everybody. So we hope that the war would end as early as possible, and we hope that the peace and stability, particularly over the more fairly use of the water resources and the more peaceful maintenance of the border and the status of Kashmir area, will be constructed tomorrow, and the peace would come back as early as possible.
Yes, although we're suffering from some turbulence, but we still can have some hope, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Wang Jing. And in our next session, we will have Mr. Rong Ying to join us, the chairperson professor at the Sichuan University. welcome back to our live stream. I'm today's host Guo Tianqi. I'm a reporter from CGTN, and today our topic is to the latest situation of the Indian-Pakistan conflict. And in this session, we're very honored to invite Mr. Rong Ying, a top scholar in China, the chair professor at Sichuan University, who has followed very closely to this situation. Hello, Mr. Rong Ying. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yes, and we know that Pakistan has quickly counterattacked and claimed to have shot down several Indian warplanes, including 3 Rafales. And what are the strategic considerations behind this military response? Because we know that India didn't respond to so much to this fight.
Yeah, it is true. I think there are certainly wide reports. With of course with various varied from in terms of the planes and the number of the planes that have been shut down by Pakistan Air Force. All in all, we know that this engagement first and foremost involved the kind of aerial attacks, and it looks like as we have been seen by the international media, apart from the Pakistan media and also the Indian media, that Indian warplanes have been shut down, and it is of course the only natural, for engagement like that. And what, of course, aroused the interest of the, watchers internationally and of course both for India and Pakistan is what resulted and lead to that result. And that is again very much related to the the inventory of India and Pakistan air forces. We all know that because of the different geopolitical environment, India has been able to reach almost all the major manufacturer or major inventory of air forces, top cutting edge technologies, with the United States, with Europe, with Russia, which is a traditional partner in terms of military equipment and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I think Pakistan, because of the sanctions and also because of its international environment, in the wake of the relationship, cooling or relationship with the United States, it was not able to use its air forces, airplanes, the F-16, other cutting edge technologies, planes imported from the United States. The United States simply put in kind of restrictions on how to use these top cutting edge advanced airplanes, and which lead Pakistan to another major partner of China. And I think this is just a reality. And Pakistan's development or capabilities in terms of air fighting is not an accident. Actually, in the previous engagement between India and Pakistan, for example, the 2019 engagement, the so-called dogfighting of the two airplanes. Again, I think Indian air pilot was shut down. The plane was shut down and pilot was captured. But of course, later on, it was returned. So all in all, we have seen a kind of a result of this first round of engagement, aerial attacks, and leading to a kind of quite interesting result, which the Indian air forces, despite the fact that they have more and advanced airplanes, better access to technology from the West, they did not, perform or they did not do as well as expected. So I think this is what we have had. And let me just conclude by saying that it is just the first round of sort of engagement. We are going to see more around, I mean, in terms of kind of a whole set of inventory. So we're talking about the missiles, we're talking about the drones, we're talking about other cutting edge technologies. I think all in all, I would only say that India, given the size, given the sort of the military expenditure, I mean, comprehensive national power economically, and so on and so forth. If we look at the numbers and also even in terms of the technology, India definitely has an advantage. So that's why it makes it interesting why this first round of aerial fight ended up not as good as well as it expected.
Mm. Yes, but this situation, this effect, this result making a lot of netizens very exciting, and they believe this showcasing a new pattern of the military equipment of the international society, such as these are the debut of different flights, war flights, from the West and the Orient. So, what's your opinion?
Well, it is true. I think, as I said, that India and Pakistan, they have a different sort of access to advanced technologies. I mean, and it came up a kind of a different sort of, I mean, quite interesting result. That raised the question that which system or which sort of inventory would be more sort of would perform in better in scenarios or in real fighting, and in this case, I think the question of the performances and the capabilities of fighting capability of Chinese sort of weaponry came into sort of into play. But I would only say that first and foremost, China's modernization, despite the military modernization, has very much, I think, was the result of its own indigenous development. That is very much for sure. And secondly, I think China, yes, it is true. If you look at the past trajectory, Chinese military weapons and others, including the fighters, jets, and others, has been, I mean, improved very well. But I would only say that China's capabilities, I mean, modernization is the growth or the development of peaceful forces. So it's China has adopted like a foreign, I mean, defense policy of defense, and China's foreign policy are always for peace. So the development of that capabilities and the technologies and others, I think is the development, the growth of China, I mean, the peaceful force. And related to that, China's sort of military cooperation with other countries in terms of, I mean, like exporting and also technology cooperation is very much principled on the premises or on the conditions where that is would help to the recipient countries or the partner countries to improve its own defense capabilities for the sake of its own defense. And it is meant there are very strict and a good track record of working on that. And of course, China and Pakistan are very good friends. And traditionally, I mean, not only economically, but I mean, politically, economically, but very much, I think, in the area of military cooperations. But I think, as we are going to see, and also historically, China's sort of cooperation, military cooperation with Pakistan has helped restore and maintain the strategic balance in the region, given I think, in a way that helps the two sides to sort of work together for a kind of sort of regional peace and stability. We have to be very clear that Pakistan, being a weaker and a smaller country, it also has its own sort of need for defense, for self-defense. So I thought that it is not such a big deal. And even though I understand very well the netizens' interest, strong interest for the first round of aerial fighting between India and Pakistan.
Yes. Let's talk something about the culture sector. We know that you are an expert of the South Asia, and on May 7th, the Indian launched the operation. It's called it as Sindoor. What's the meaning of the Sindoor? And could you tell us more about the importance of the Kashmir zone in terms of its religious importance and why there are so many pilgrim sites in the Kashmir region?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, of course, it has quite, I mean, if you look at the history of India and Pakistan conflict, it's become the kind of a tradition for both India and Pakistan to have a kind of a code name for its operations. I think for these operations that have been conducted by India, by naming the Sindhu, which is again very much related to the Hindu culture, Hinduist culture, it is very much, I think, a deliberate effort to send a message that first and foremost related to the victim that has been killed by the terrorist attacks, the Haugan, and because majority and almost all of them, I think the 27 out of 20, 25 out of 26 victims were Hindu tourists, tourist Hindu, and the Sindhu refers, I mean, culturally in India, Hindu culture, to that red orange colored powder. Which usually the bridegroom of Indian, I mean Indian Hindu, would be put on the face, I mean the forehead, or parting of the hairs of a groom, symbolizing a kind of good wishes for good luck, prosperity, and also I think a kind of commitment of the grooms to their husband. So I think by making the code name of Sindhu, the Indian side wanted to send a very strong message of vengeance for these victims, and particularly these widowed victims. And of course, this is very much, I think, a game of religion. And with regard to the question of why there are so many, I think, sort of Hindu tourists, I mean, particularly those victims, it is in Kashmir. India controlled Kashmir. It's largely because of history and the culture of Kashmir, which I mean, historically has been the places, I mean, where different cultures, different religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Islam has been interacting historically. And while these interactions has enriched the culture, the cultural sort of aspects, civilizational aspects of Kashmir, unfortunately, it also created, I mean, many problems and I mean disputes, and that is also very much complicated by the partition in 1947, when India and Pakistan, when they achieved their independence, the princely state of Kashmir becomes a kind of a issue for dispute, because the region as a whole is predominantly Muslims, while the king of that princely state was Hindu. So it ended up with a bitter war. And with three sort of three fourths, I mean third fourth of the region, and three, I think three, yes, 60% of the region and 40% of the 60% of area and 40% of the, I mean 40% of the area and 60% of the population went to India. So that was the problem of that. And with the sort of the Indian side that always try to integrate it, making that region more sort of Indian, or despite the fact that it's a dispute in the areas. And as recently as 2019, the Modi administration, the Indian government has reversed, I mean, changed the constitution, which give the Indian controlled part of Kashmir and like a special status. So making it possible for more Hindu people to travel, to even to live and work there. That, of course, further sort of complicate or even provoke the disputes of the region. I think that is quite, to some extent, the largely contribute the background, the religious and the background to this unfortunate incident. And of course, I think all forms, as I said, terrorism, whatever means or whatever argument, should be condemned. And it's very unfortunate that this terrorist attacks happened, and so many Indian tourists were killed. And I think this is now we are very much unfortunate have the tensions arising from that.
Yes, indeed. This place should be a very famous sightseeing spot, but right now the casualties and have caused, and already the ordinary people have damaged, the infrastructure is also damaged. So what more effective measures do you think the international society should take to promote the de-escalation of the situation?
Yeah, given the fact that the over the past sort of 70 years and more, the two countries, India and Pakistan, have been fighting 3 wars. Some of them say 4 wars. If you look at, if you take into account the Kargil crisis, 1999, and numerous conflicts, and ever since 1998, the nuclearization of India and Pakistan, that conflict, that disputes of Kashmir now has a nuclear sort of the risk of nuclear clashes, nuclear sort of a conflict. That is the reason why the international community has always been trying to call upon the two sides to work out their differences, to manage and resolve the disputes, Kashmir disputes, through diplomatic means and politically, through dialogues and negotiations. And whenever there is a kind of conflict, and particularly, I think in the last decades, since I think the nuclearization of the India and Pakistan, there have always been efforts, jointly efforts, I would say, that they call upon the two sides to work out their differences. And ever since this round of crisis, and unfortunately, as we've seen, is escalating very fast, and the international community, UN, had also called upon, expressed the grave concerns, and for that escalation and the dialogue, and most importantly, I think has offered, a lot of them have offered, for example, Iran, and the foreign minister of Iran, actually, the days back, was visiting in Pakistan and others, and also the Saudis, and of course, I think the United States and China. We only hope that the two sides would heed the advice and the calling of the international community, and they would take efforts to de-escalate and to work together, because as we have seen, the history and the complexity of this conflict, I mean this dispute, and there's no sort of military solutions, and the only way is political dialogue, political solution, as the Chinese foreign ministry statement has calling upon. And China has also said that it will continue to play a constructive role, and it would be happy to play a kind of a role to help as a neighbor, close neighbor of both India and Pakistan.
So what role can China play? What can China do to to resolve, to restrain, de-escalate the relationship between the two countries? Can China provide a platform for them to negotiate in the future?
Well, as I said, that China has already has very much ready, and has been, as a matter of fact, has been doing through various means, publicly and privately, communicating with the two sides for to try to help. And traditionally, if you look at the history of the conflict, I mean, India and Pakistan, China has always been provided kind of such a kind of a constructive role, to be a good office of India and Pakistan, and of course for various reasons, for reasons actually known to India and Pakistan, I think Pakistan has been very much, I think, sort of welcome China to play kind of a role, while India, I mean, for certain reasons, they don't want kind of so-called internationalization of this dispute, so they prefer bilateral sort of approach. But if you look at the past interactions, I mean, conflict and the tensions, China has indeed very much, I think, play a role, which I think India, if not publicly and privately, has very much acknowledged. Specifically at this moment, I think the most important thing is international community, the big countries, Russia, United States, and UN certainly very much important. The UN Security Council. I mean, this is of course a very important arena. And the friendly countries like in the region, as I said, have all offered their help. And so that is something I think diplomatic sort of pressure, if I can say, that is that at this moment. Otherwise, I think for me, the there are other things we can do, because if one reads very carefully the official positions of the two sides, despite the military, so I mean the engagement, the conflict, the aerial fighting, the missile attacks, counter attacks, it seems it's quite clear that the two sides are very much hold their position that they don't want to escalate. They don't want to sort of expand this, the conflict into a full-scale war. But that is only the position. The position and the statement do not go sort of sidewise for the actions. We have seen very unfortunate that the past 2 days, I mean, few days since May the 7th, military attacks, I mean, by India, and the counter sort of reaction, counter attacks by Pakistan, see the tension escalating very fast. So possibly the first and foremost sort of issue is that the international community should come up with sort of kind of a creative, innovative ideas how to ensure that escalation would not go further, so that it would lead to even wider and more dangerous conflict. Here I'm looking at I'm referring to for example, the expanding of the attack of the targets. Remember that when made the statement, I think India they are responsible for their attacks to be so-called measured, calibrated, and collaterally. Unfortunately, we have seen that, and they're not targeted on civilians and military sort of ones. But unfortunately, we have seen attacks and contacts now expanding. And this is very much unfortunate, because it could easily lead to the problem where something would come out of control. Not to mention the real, nightmare that of the nuclear clashes.
Yes, yes. But talking about India and Pakistan, we're in our mind is always conflict and historical problems, but in which key areas should the two sides engage in dialogue and cooperation? For example, the collaborative usage of the water resources, and what obstacles do they have to overcome?
That's a great question. I think we look at the relations, I mean, history of relations between India and Pakistan. I think certainly, as I said, that they have fought 3 wars, 4 wars, numerous conflicts, numerous attacks and problem. Uh, but they have also, I think, through in the course of that interactions or conflict, reached some very important agreements. The Indus Waters Treaty, and also I think the similar agreement and others are just, I mean, as important as the conflict and wars that we're talking about. Unfortunately, this round of sort of conflict, India, for the sake of pressurizing Pakistan, they have I expanded their responses through in terms of suspending the Indus Waters Treaty. This is unprecedented and very unfortunate. And other response, Pakistan said that they would also sort of suspend the but most important bilateral sort of agreement, like similar agreement and others. And that development is again very worrisome because it is not only by suspension for suspension has sort of get rid of kind of the result. I mean, Congress positive sort of aspect of their interactions, but also in a way, literally, they write off a kind of a boundary or limits of the conflict. So what worries people is that without limits or without a boundary and of the conflict, and there will be simply, I mean, not only the easy and risky escalation, it could easily expand, I mean, the conflict into all sort of full kind of scale war. That would be disaster, and that would be very much, I think, a scenario where nobody want to see. I think at the UN UN Secretary General, I think Guterres said, we don't want to have one more, enough regional conflict, don't want to have one more. And I think the region and the world as a whole cannot afford a new conflict like that can easily go out of control, even to the kind of nuclear clashes.
Yes, while we're talking about the international relations as well as the what can the international society do, but the local people, they're living in the Kashmir region, their lifestyle have changed permanently.
Of their, I mean, the life and the properties and the normal life that very much disrupted. As a matter of fact, in the wake of the terrorist attacks on the, I mean, these tourists, the Indian authorities in Indian-controlled Kashmir has already exercised a kind of a very strict control in terms of security. So their normal life has already been in sort of attacked, and not to mention the shellings, mutual shellings across, and also that has lead to deaths of civilians. So it has always been, I think, the civilians, these people in not only, I think, in Kashmir, the Indian-controlled and Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, which I have seen, have reported sort of casualties, but also across the international border of Punjab and others. And flights has been suspended or diverted. And also, I think, because of the suspension or announced suspension of Indus Waters Treaty, I think Pakistan agriculture, Pakistan normal life will be going to be suffer. and of course India too. And you look at the civil defense drills, the blackouts, the power and I mean sort of a shortage and so on and so forth. This is very unfortunate. I mean, whatever the case, whatever the reasons, I think it is, and I hope that the two sides, the two governments would take into the real life, I mean, the livelihood of the two peoples into consideration, that they would, I mean, sooner, I mean, at the earliest possible, I mean, that to seek dialogue for political solution. And I said that there's no solution, no military solution, whatsoever, I mean, that for their disputes.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Professor Rong Ying. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have to know that despite it's a regional conflict, the two countries have nuclear weapons. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
for having me.
yeah, and later you're looking at the live of the view of Karachi's skyline in Pakistan. And later we will go live to our correspondent Kaswar Kalasad. Stay tuned and hoping we can see you very soon. Goodbye. This is today's live stream. I'm reporter Guo Tianqi. our live stream. I'm CGTN's reporter Guo Tianqi, and today we're still talking about the latest Indian-Pakistan conflict. And right now I have our stringer, Mr. Kaswal Klasal from Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan. And Mr. Kaswal, what's the latest situation?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Let me tell you that Pakistan has actually bombarded India using four, dimensional strategy. First strategy was earlier, very early morning today. They attacked different installations across India, and they actually bombarded 20 installations across India. And among these 20 installations, all of them were, the military installation of fasting. And secondly, as a part of their grand strategy, Chinese fighter jet was used, including J-10, J-17, J-10E, and other missile technology as well. And at the fourth part of this strategy was to use more sophisticated and latest technology drones, and all of these strategy were actually have been actually hatched by the Pakistani security forces. And at the moment, I can tell you, it is afternoon in Pakistan. The attack actually unleashed. Pakistan attacked very early in the morning at 5 a.m. Pakistan Standard Time, and until now, 70% of Indian population doesn't have access to electricity first thing. And secondly, 20 of most sophisticated and technologically advanced, airships and also the air bases have been reduced in bubble. And what is the most important is that Pakistan used JF-17 to neutralize, and then bombard S-400, that is the anti-aircraft and anti-missile technology, anti-missile system that have been reduced into ashes. So far, Pakistan has inflicted losses on India amounting 80 billion have been bombarded by the Pakistani jets, and above all, Pakistan's cyber technologists have actually taken down 3,000 websites of India. So Pakistan have actually inflicted heavy losses on India. And one thing that I want to tell you is that yesterday I was among 20 journalists who met, and General Ahmad Sharif was well determined. I put up a question that what Pakistan is going to do tomorrow. Yesterday, remember, I asked this question to General Ahmad Sharif yesterday, and the general replied in a very confident tone, that Mr. Klasla, we will be unleashing such a horrible attack on Indian side that they had never imagined. They have actually started the war, and we are going to end it. And let me tell you, my friend, today, as I speak to you, let me tell you very confidently that Pakistan has almost won this war. 70% of the household in India, they have no access to electricity. More than 20 air bases have been reduced to rubble, and above all, and iconic spots, including the BJP headquarters and other military headquarters, have been actually reduced to ashes. It is one of the horrible attacks that Pakistan Army unleashed on its, enemy, that the enemy had never imagined. I can tell you in a one-liner, that is Pakistan Armed Forces and Pakistan's armed chief lived up to his commitment. a couple of days ago, the Pakistan Armed Forces chief told actually the reporters that India has started the war and we are going to end it. And today, as I speak to you, I think Pakistan has won the battle. 3 days ago, when reporters asked the President Donald Trump if he is going to mediate between Pakistan and India, his reply was really iconic. He replied that Pakistan and India are a habitual, and we are not going to mediate between these two countries. But after 2 days, Pakistan inflicted heavy losses on the India, and now we just, as I speak to you, just a 40-minute ago, the U.S. Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State, spoke to Pakistan's army chief, and he requested that please do not escalate the tension, and we are going to mediate it. And this is something that Pakistan say that we have won the war against India. So this is not ordinary thing. 7 of the Rafale have been gunned on, and as many as the locally produced Indian jets have been gunned on. S-400, that amounts to more than 1.5 billion US dollars that have been reduced to rubble using Chinese aircraft JF-17. So it is a war that actually Pakistan has won. And now the world community is requesting Pakistani side to please stop and do not escalate, because if Pakistan gets the chance for in next 20 or 48 hours, Pakistan's armed forces has the capacity to reduce more than 70% of India into rubble. So that is why they are requesting Pakistan not to escalate.
Yes. Yes. So although that you consider the Pakistan have already won one battle, but still the Pakistan wish is to de-escalate the situation.
Yes, they have been put a pressure on Pakistani side, Pakistan's military, to not to de-escalate the situation. But let me tell you one thing, that last 3 days, Indian missiles, Indian aircraft, and Indian drone have been attacking more than 7 iconic cities, including they attacked Islamabad, they attacked Rawalpindi, they unleashed attack in Lahore, they unleashed attack in Karachi. But not a single, country asked India to not to de-escalate. Pakistan has been, since day one, have been asking the world community that it is actually willing to investigate Pahalgam attack, but including not a single country, including United States, Europe, and other countries, they even did not listen to Pakistan. Let me tell you that it all started with the so-called false flag operation in Pahalgam. And can you imagine that Indian authorities registered FIR within 10 minutes after the attack was happened? And it never happened in the history of modern warfare that any country has filed first information report within the 10 minutes. And that was done without investigating the incident. Pakistan, from the very first day, asked United States, United Nations, Europe, and even India, let us do not escalate. Let's investigate the matter mutually. But Indian side never ever listened to United States, United Nations, or even to Pakistani side as well. But after 3 days, can you imagine the pressure on Pakistan's incumbent government of Pakistan forces? They have been under pressure by the Pakistani government, Pakistani, the public, because Indian aircraft, Indian drones, Indian, missile have been attacking Rawalpindi, all the big cities. Pakistan armed forces were under immense pressure to retaliate, but still, the charismatic armed forces chief, Mr. Asim Munir, had to wait for 3 days. They have been telling the world that we both are, Pakistan and India, Pakistan, India, our armed forces has, both are nuclear capable countries. Do not escalate the situation. Pakistan have been asking the world community to place pressure on India not to escalate. But three for 72 hours, world community, India did not listen to the world community, and Pakistan armed forces has to attack, has to log their target in India. And today, imagine that after 72 hours, after 3 days, now we are getting calls from United States of America. The Pakistani authorities are getting calls from Europe, France, and other European countries as well. But this is the iconic time. This is the right time that Pakistan is not going to listen to the world community. And now, let me tell you, yesterday I was among the 20 journalists who met the Director General of ISPR. And I must quote the last word of the Director General, General Ahmad Sharif. He said that, Mr. Modi, your India, your armed forces have started the war, and we are going to end it. And I am glad to tell you that the Pakistan armed forces, the Pakistan army chief, lived up to his commitment. The war that was actually started by Indian side, now Pakistan is going to end it, but with its own condition. So until now, as I speak to you, Pakistan is in a position. Pakistan, I repeat, Pakistan is in a position to aim to reduce Indian army installations into rubble. But still, just just 30 minutes, just half an hour ago, I spoke to Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister, who is also the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. I spoke to him, and then I wanted to get his comment that what Pakistan is going to do if the European and Americans are requesting Pakistan, will Pakistan stop the war? And then he replied, yeah, we do not want to escalate the war. But it is important to tell the world that Pakistan has been asking the world community to ask India not to escalate. But India did not listen to any of the country in the world. But now that Pakistan armed forces has shown its might to the world, now the Pakistani authorities are getting calls from Trump administration and other administration in the Europe and other Scandinavian countries as well. But I think Pakistan has won the war. Pakistan was the first country that actually asked the United Nations to mediate between Pakistan and India because Pakistan did not want to escalate the situation. But at that moment, no country in the world, including the United Nations, they did not listen except Chinese and other Turkish and Azerbaijanis. But now Pakistan is in a position it can reduce India into a rubble. Let me tell you from the heart of Islamabad at the moment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kaswal in Islamabad. Our live stream will continue. Please stay tuned on the CGTN website and on social media platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Weibo, and WeChat. And thank you again, Mr. Kaswal. Stay safe. Hope we can see you very soon.
India and Pakistan traded fire after Islamabad's military action against India in the early hours of the day. Meanwhile, authorities in India say 5 people have been killed in Pakistani attacks in the Jammu region of Indian-controlled Kashmir. The Indian military has said it is committed to non-escalation if Pakistan reciprocates. India also closes 32 airports across the north and west until May the 15th. For what's happening on the ground, we have Daniel Han standing by in Rawalpindi and Ravinder Bawat in Delhi. Hello to you both. So let me start with you, Daniel. What's the current situation on the ground?
Well, I just came back from Muzaffarabad, the Pakistan-administered Kashmir, and I've just arrived here in Rawalpindi, and I'm just a kilometer away from the Noor Khan Air Base, where last night an Indian missile reportedly stuck, and we tried to make our way inside, but due to security concerns, we were not allowed to. Meanwhile, what I have seen here in Islamabad and Rawalpindi is that things are quite calm. People are going about their lives, shops are open, hotels are open, but I've also spoken to the people. They say that their life is quite normal. But we know that in retaliation last night after this attack took place, Pakistan retaliated, and according to the defense sources, struck more than 12 Indian military sites inside India. And there was a huge loss. Pakistani media is reporting of about $83 billion of loss to these Indian installations inside its territory. And now we know that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has called on a meeting later in the day, and that will include all the major political parties as well as chiefs of the armed forces. And later on the day, we know that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif will have an address to the nation. Yes.
Well, Daniel, India says it's committed to non-escalation if Pakistan reciprocates. How is Pakistan reacting to that?
This feeling has been here in Pakistan for the last 2 weeks, ever since the Pahalgam attack took place, and India started blaming Pakistan without showing any sort of proof or evidence. We know that officials, the government of Pakistan, as well as the military personnel, have been asking for some sort of an evidence that shows that Pakistan was in fact involved in the Pahalgam attack. But despite that, India went on to escalate the situation. I was in Muzaffarabad and I was at the line of control. There was skirmishes, there was cross-border firing, the ceasefire violation taking place from the Indian side. And while that was happening, Pakistan was showing restraint. The officials and the military people were showing restraint, saying that there has to be some sort of an impartial investigation into the attack. But last night, when this huge Pakistan Air Force base was struck by Indian missile, that was the ticking point for Pakistan, and that is when Pakistan retaliated. But it has always been saying that it is open for dialogue. We are also getting unconfirmed reports that a backdoor channel has been opened up, and this is what the people of Pakistan say. I've spoken to many experts here, and they say that sanity should prevail, and both countries should now it's time to sit together and talk over whatever is happening. Yes.
Thank you, Daniel Han, reporting from Rawalpindi for the latest. Now let's talk to Ravinder Bawat in Delhi. Hello, Ravinder. So what's the latest over there?
Well, people woke up to loud explosions in the whole of northwest and northern region in these border towns. As the morning light came up, the trail of destruction was visible. Damaged homes, damaged cars, buildings. Was quite clear that the drones and the armed drones which were targeted had come and did some destruction in the civilian areas. As you just said, 5 people lost their life in the Jammu region. That's what the police is saying. Some have been injured as well. A lot of these border town residents are now thinking twice about staying there and moving out to safer places, because it looks like as the days are passing, the intensity of the attack is increasing, and in which which a number of civilians are getting hurt, and that is something which India is not willing to take, digest, and that is why it is important that they attack the air bases. As we were told in the morning in the briefing, that India has managed to, attack 6 of the air bases in Pakistan. At the same time, these mortars and these drones have also managed to do some harm at 4 Air Force bases in India, in which there has been harm and damage to equipment and personnel as well. That was admitted in the press conference this morning. What we have seen a little while back, that the Prime Minister held a high-level meeting with all the chiefs of 3 Army, Navy and Air Force, and Chief of Defence Staff and Defence Minister. He was apprised about the situation on the ground. At the same time, there is red alert in a number of towns. So yes, the situation continues to be tense between the 2 neighbors and along the border. Back to you, Shuyan.
Well, Ravinder, what is the government's plan to deal with the rising tensions with Pakistan, though?
Well, just before I was going to come on air right now, we saw news breaking on local media, quoting sources, saying that if any act of, attack will happen from the side of Pakistan, it will be considered as an act of war by India. In this morning in the briefing, it was clearly said that Pakistan is actually increasing deployment of troops in the forward areas, and this clearly shows an intent of escalation. That's what the defense officials who conduct this briefing for the media have said, and they have said that if that is the case, if there is any escalation, India will reciprocate, and India is actually not willing to go ahead, and it is a non-escalatory exercise that they are doing. But in case Pakistan provocates or reciprocates, then India will have to retaliate. India will have to give them an answer. So that is the kind of mood that we are seeing here. But definitely, in the meantime, some lives have been lost, damage to a number of properties along the border, in the border towns. 26 air intrusions, many air intrusions in 26 locations across the border. That's what we were told. So yes, things are spiraling, up the escalatory ladder.
Okay, thank you for the update, Ravinder Pawar, reporting from Delhi. The strained relations between India and Pakistan go back decades. We take a look at the events leading up to the escalating tensions this year.
On April 22nd, gunmen killed 26 people and wounded many others in an attack on tourists in the town of Pahalgam in Indian-controlled Kashmir. The victims were mostly Hindu men. India blames militant groups it says are backed by Pakistan, but Pakistan has denied all involvement and called for a neutral investigation. The next day, India suspended the long-standing 1960 Indus Waters Treaty. The agreement regulates water sharing from the Indus River and its tributaries. Islamabad warned it would consider any stop to water flow an act of war. Over 80% of Pakistan's agriculture and hydropower industry depends on water from the Indus Basin. On April 25th, Pakistan suspended all trade with India, including through third countries. Both countries then closed airspace to each other's airlines, and India revoked most visas issued to Pakistani nationals. All this led to tit-for-tat gunfire exchanges in the border regions until May 6, when India fired 24 missiles targeting Pakistan-controlled Kashmir and Punjab province. India says it limited targets to 9 terrorist infrastructure sites. The Pakistani military says it shot down 5 Indian aircraft and reported that the strikes killed at least 31 people.
Let's have a look at other headlines around the world. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says she'll only visit the White House
you for watching the live stream of CGTN, our in-depth coverage of the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan has brought you the latest on-the-ground insights from correspondents in Islamabad, New Delhi, Muzaffarabad, and Srinagar, as well as valuable perspectives from our expert guests. As the situation continues to evolve, stay tuned to our channels on CGTN's website, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Weibo, and WeChat for further updates. And thank you for joining us in this comprehensive exploration of this critical geographical issue. I'm CGTN's reporter Guo Tianqi. Hope to see you very soon. Bye bye.